The original Gojira was fantastic. The American adaptation 2 years later was incredibly good. Following films from Toho range from incredibly fun to actually quite awful. But while I've not seen every film and don't pretend to be an expert on the subject, one thing I love about even the bad entries in this franchise is the amount of symbolism and commentary present. Like I said previously, horror can be a great look into the fears and worries of a society, and Godzilla is perhaps the franchise that most exemplifies that. In Gojira, nuclear weapons are directly responsible for both awakening and further empowering the titular monster. The destruction of Tokyo mirrors the US military's nuclear bombings of civilian-majority Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Ishiro Honda intentionally gave Gojira the attributes of a nuclear bomb. There are even keloid scars on his body, reminiscent of the ones found on the survivors of the bombs. And when Dr. Hirata develops a weapon powerful enough to defeat Gojira, he, spoilers for a pretty old movie, kills himself rather than risk letting that information get into anybody else's hands. To quote producer Tomoyuki Tanaka, the theme of the film from the beginning was the terror of the bomb. Mankind had created the bomb, and now nature was going to take revenge on mankind. And even though none of the other films have the same somber tone and competent storytelling to the same level as the first movie, the franchise continued to provide solemn reflection on the dangers that faced humanity. Anguirus is also awakened by U.S. nuclear weapons testing. Mothra was conceptualized from screenwriter Shinichi Sekizawa's experiences of starvation in the South Pacific during World War II, while also representing the cyclical nature of life in a very religious sense. Rodan is believed to represent the emergence of the Soviet Union as a nuclear power, and Ghidorah is believed by some to represent the same for China. Ebirah is a terrorist's weapon, one that is dangerous enough even to those who use it. Manila was created by Tomoyuki Tanaka as a commemoration of the passing of years. Destroy All Monsters displays the potential dangers of relying on nuclear energy, as well as the benefits. Gigan and Mechagodzilla represent the destruction of colonialism, with Mechagodzilla in particular representing the colonization of Okinawa, whereas King Caesar seems to represent the idea of Okinawan independence. And that's just from the movies I've seen. Some quick research tells me Hedorah is the physical representation of yokkaichi asthma brought on by urban pollution. Biollante showcases the fear and uncertainty of the impact of genetically modifying organisms, and Destoroyah represents the dangers of polluting the ocean. Now don't get me wrong, not all of these are well conveyed, but even the worst movies have things for me to really enjoy, as they speak on the horrors that science and technology can bring, as well as the guilt that is borne by those who put the lives of others at risk, be it intentionally in the earlier movies, or unintentionally when it comes to pollution. Each kaiju reflects not just the concept of horrors that can be inflicted on innocents, but that horror can be from other humans as well. That's what separates Godzilla from imitators and competitors, and why, despite being a comparatively new character when you look at others like King Kong, Godzilla is more recognizable than other older kaiju icons. Godzilla is scary not because dinosaurs are scary or death is scary, although they are, but because the acts of humans that intend to hurt other humans can be cruel, thoughtless, and merciless, and lead to unforeseen and unimaginable consequences. Which is partly why Godzilla 2014 is so disappointing. Alright, obligatory part of the video where I give a movie that I don't really care for a bit of credit. The effects are smartly used and the kaiju kept in the shadows, like in the original, so that it's not too obvious where they wouldn't be well used. In fact, this is probably the best looking Godzilla movie. Cranston and Binoche have the power to make their early deaths impactful enough, despite there not being too much emotional impact on their son, or really the rest of the movie. Straighthair and Watanabe feel like they're from a different, much better Godzilla movie where there's actually a discussion to be had about the dangers and evil of atomic weaponry, and their chemistry is the best part of the film. Lastly, the sequence of Ford trying to reunite the little kid with his parents is fantastic and actually manages to blend horror and drama in a way that the rest of the film really doesn't. Okay, so with that out of the way, why does Godzilla 2014 disappoint me so much? And keep in mind, something can be disappointing without being bad. But when you compare the messages of this film with the films in the original franchise, even though many of the sequel films were sillier and probably an overall worse movie than this one, there is a great decrease in socio-political significance. What is the theme of Godzilla 2014, according to those who worked on the film? Well, David Callahan, the original story writer, wanted to portray Godzilla as a disaster. Final rewriter Frank Darabont wanted to portray Godzilla as a force of nature and move away from the atomic metaphor. And according to director Garrett Edwards, quote, Godzilla is definitely a representation of the wrath of nature. We've taken it very seriously, and the theme is man versus nature, and Godzilla is certainly the nature side of it. You can't win that fight. Nature is always going to win, and that's what the subtext of our movie is about. He's the punishment we deserve. End quote. No longer is Godzilla representative of the uncontrollable horrors that humans can inflict on each other. No longer is it a warning about the dangers of war and weapons of mass destruction. No more warning about nuclear material at all, in fact. It's simply nature, as itself, without the interference of humanity, that is dangerous, and against humanity. Humanity is united against nature in this film, and the use of nuclear weapons is only against nature, not man. Now, you might think the movie references nuclear energy. One of the characters' fathers was at Hiroshima, and the monsters are attracted to radiation. How could this not be about the bomb? Well, beyond the writers and directors explicitly saying that it isn't, Godzilla is not awoken by weapons testing like he was in the original. He was awoken by exploration. Humans just stumbled upon him, and get this, the bomb testing in Bikini Atoll, which led to the permanent displacement of the indigenous Micronesians, the irradiation of hundreds of innocents, decreased fertility rates, thyroid tumors, medical malpractice, food and water contamination, leukemia, starvation, and death. A perfect example of how the toll of the use of nuclear armament extends beyond the initial explosion and is more dangerous than even the people who intend to use the weapons expect it to be. A case of the United States government lying to a group of people whose lives they irreparably changed. In Godzilla 2014, it's described as an attempt to pacify Godzilla. Seriously, they're trying to save people. History has already whitewashed the events, played down the human costs of these tests, and that is, of course, much worse than a fictional movie. However, for a fictional movie to do so, though certainly less serious, is incredibly distasteful. It's disrespectful to the memories of the lost and the struggles of the survivors. And of course, saying that the irradiation of the atoll was the USA military's desperate attempt to save people's lives rather than the result of tests conducted to improve the lethality of nuclear weapons works to portray the United States military in a more positive light. In fact, our main human character, Ford Brody, is a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy who is directly responsible for saving Godzilla's life and thus allowing him to defeat the Mutos, saving the west coast of North America. To take a film about the wanton destruction of life caused by the United States in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and to turn it into soft propaganda for the training and explosive expertise provided by the U.S. military. To take a film that shows how nature responds to misuse of atomic materials and turn it into some weak, nature is dangerous message is so disappointing that for as competently as some of this movie is made, I can't help but feel it's a letdown for the franchise. Not from a technical standpoint, mind you, or even from a storytelling angle, but when it comes to symbolism, Godzilla 2014 is toothless. They didn't want to say anything that would potentially offend an audience, and I get that. But by not saying anything that would be offensive, they ended up not saying anything at all.